As filmmakers operating independently from the film industry, Outward Film Network have utilised zero-budget filmmaking as the only accessible option to realise our projects. Creating the network was a way to unite others in the same position and advocate creative freedom over cosmetic decadence, adherence to narrative formula, and manufacturing of artistic endeavours. Whilst technology has made zero-budget filmmaking a practical reality for filmmakers like ourselves, it was the Dogme 95 movement founded in 1995 Copenhagen by Danish film directors Lars von Trier, co-owner of the Zentropa film studio, Thomas Vinterberg, Christian Levering, and Søren Kragh Jacobsen that helped form our philosophy and free our concept of filmmaking from sensationalism through attempting to find a form of truth in our work. Dogme 95 aimed to counter the perceived film of illusion, superficial action and effects masking a barren result with the illusion of pathos and love, by drawing up a manifesto known as the Vow of Chastity. This consisted of the 10 following rules. The fundamental point of the Vow of Chastity was to strip away cinema's artifice for the sake of truth in the characters and settings. There are certainly arguments against the Dogme filmmakers remaining true to their manifesto, and often broke their own rules, even as early as the second film made by von Trier, The Idiots. And it's certainly true that Outward Film Network's own short films and one feature, Night Lens, disregard much of the Vow of Chastity. That is not the point to make here. The point is that the Dogme 95 manifesto encouraged a spirit of freedom to look beyond what you should do to what you could actually do with limited funds. The 10 rules open a filmmaker's mind to being creative in the moment, to appreciating what you have available and how to make it work in a film. Dogme 95 might have started as a revolutionary call to arms, but it has arguably been fortunate to coincide with the digital revolution in cinema, and offers a practical guide for considering alternatives to achieving truth when working with limited means. But it is this message of searching for the truth in what the camera sees that makes Dogme 95 so compelling for filmmakers, as a reminder to chastise ourselves for frivolous embellishments. It is important to note that Dogme 95's concept was an artistic one and not economic. Von Trier and Vinterberg were well connected and had no trouble securing funding for their film projects. They wanted to take aim at established commercial filmmakers. But for underground filmmakers like us at Outward Film Network, it is this artistic concept that appeals the most. We are restricted by situation, not by choice, so to have our own struggles legitimized was refreshing and freeing. Filmmaking by its nature is manipulative in terms of how, even with asceticism enforced, a film is edited to engineer a particular reaction from an audience. Accepting the Dogme manifesto at face value, therefore, would be naive. So it is the spirit, its urgent call to filmmakers to remember why they picked up a camera in the first place, that connects so much better with new filmmakers and underground filmmakers than those operating in a commercial environment. Of course, the Dogme 95 filmmakers are part of the same system now that they claim to reject. Vinterberg has adapted Thomas Hardy for the film studios, von Trier has worked in Hollywood. It is the Dogme 95 films themselves that contain the rebellious spirit of the manifesto. Therefore, and regardless of adherence to arbitrary rules, for is not creativity about moving around the rules, they remain a suitable blueprint for helping independent filmmakers to embrace restrictions as opportunities for finding the truth in settings and characters. Vinterberg started the official movement with the exceptional Festen, The Celebration, from 1998. A tale of family reunion unleashing dark secrets from the past. The film focused on imbuing the characters with emotional resonance and quirks of behaviour to create a memorable truth, rejecting the use of anti-dogma techniques such as flashbacks, prologues, and voiceovers. The film is better for it. It was shot on a small handheld digital video camera with no cables, tracks, or tripods. The film took place in one location, a staple of keeping costs down on low-budget films. Older actors reportedly found a liberation when they discovered they didn't have to play to a single camera. and could instead occupy the entire field of motion. The freedom of the performances in Festen bring the immediacy and tenacity of the theatre, with a healthy dollop of that elusive truth referenced frequently thus far. It was then von Trier's turn to deliver on the manifesto's promises with The Idiots, also released in 1998, about a group of young Danes who decide to play pranks on the citizens of their town and disrupt society with their absurdist behaviour. While the shoot had a sense of libertarianism to it, the cast and crew had naked days where they all stripped off and worked in the buff. It was a rigorously planned and executed film that worked to a scripted approach that belied the initial attempts at improvisation. Despite its surprising formalism, The Idiots does feel spontaneous and experimental, wild and untamed, and its energy surpassed filmmaking mechanisms, finding the truth despite using these mechanisms in terms of script and scheduling. Perhaps The Idiots remains the best example of the spirit of Dogma 95 triumphing against convention, whereas Festen is the most potent product of engaging with the rules head-on. Søren Kragh Jacobsen followed The Idiots with Mifune in 1999, which follows a call girl fleeing from her pimp to the countryside, where she takes up a housekeeper position with two brothers. Her younger brother joins them to form a dysfunctional family in a social realist fairy tale. Kragh Jacobsen preferred a more relaxed, static camera style than with Festen and The Idiots, looking for intensity and energy between the actors instead. It used the rule of no music unless within the scene itself effectively to contribute to an atmosphere of subtlety and solace, and is considered by many to lack subversiveness in the manner of the first two Dogma films. But Kragh Jacobsen, though he was a founding father of the movement, was a more experienced filmmaker with a clear idea of what he wanted to do. He just used Dogma to explore his own preferences in cinema. The first wave of Dogma concluded with Christian Lovering's The King is Alive, which features a group of tourists and their bus driver becoming stranded in a desert mining town and deciding to perform King Lear to keep boredom and desperation at bay. Lovering admitted he did not follow the manifesto explicitly, and rather tellingly identified the crux of Dogma's appeal to filmmakers the world over. What it's all about, he said, is to push yourself as much as possible in the direction of the rules, since as soon as you shoot a close-up, it's the result of personal taste. The second wave of Dogma films was led by Lone Scherfig, who became the first female director to take up the Dogma challenge and also succeeded in collecting the biggest box office returns for a Dogma film. Italian for Beginners, a loose romantic comedy about a group of lonely people coming together through a language class, became one of the 5 most seen films ever in Denmark, and played well abroad thanks to its universal themes of good people who don't deserve miserable fates and finding love in a dysfunctional world. Italian for Beginners was followed by Erka Sandgren's Truly Human. Sandgren was to form a Dogma-like concept called Director's Cut for filmmaking, focusing on 5 rules, which were aimed more at the zero-budget approach to address logistical challenges during production. Then came Ole Christian Madsen's Kira's Reason, a love story, and Susan Beer's Open Hearts, which broke opening weekend box office grosses for a Dogma film. Dogma extended beyond Denmark to global filmmakers, and although this created a schism between the perceived purity of Danish Dogma and foreign Dogma, not least because many foreign filmmakers played loosely with the Dogma rules, but also because the elite Danish filmmakers were making Dogma films, and less experienced filmmakers were taking up the challenge abroad. Zentropa producer Ib Tardini commented, "It would be cool if a director like Milos Forman made a Dogma film. There seems to be a tendency to look down on Dogma films, and that's because they make them so badly outside Denmark." Despite Tardini's assertions, many Danish Dogma films were made by relative newcomers, and Vinterberg himself was inexperienced when he made Festen. Outside of Denmark, global filmmakers were able to embrace the manifesto as part of an underground movement to create transgressive, subversive films that would struggle to find support from financiers and mainstream producers. As director Rich Martini of Dogma 15 Camera noted, "It's hard to chastise someone for breaking the rules when the concept is based on breaking the rules." Dogme officially ended as a movement in 2002 with the closing of the Secretariat, and at roughly 35 official productions. But its spirit lives on. The impact of digital video on filmmaking practices allowed cheap films to become culturally significant. For example, the Blair Witch Project had no official affiliation with Dogme, but its ethos was essentially Dogme. But there is the concern raised by cinematographer Anthony Dodmantle, who worked on Festen and The Idiots. In the wake of Dogme, there have followed a lot of cheap films, whose only apparent quality is that they are cheap. The Dogme Secretariat claimed that Dogme is not for amateurs, and while it is hard to argue with many DV-shot films being of inadequate quality, the proponents of creative freedom contradict themselves with this statement. By dint of the manifesto's aims to confront formulaic movie making, Dogme gave a voice to the thousands of amateurs like myself who had no hope of making a film through traditional methods, and legitimised our ambitions. Dogme has an elasticity of concept that goes beyond the official years of the movement, and that rebellious desire to find inventive ways to the truth, outside of the established means of realising a film production, continues to liberate storytellers the world over.